Transcendental Transformation, the place where spirituality and transformation unite. Host Miss Raina imparts truth so that you can break through your limiting beliefs and evolve into a deeper consciousness. As you go about your day, remember, before every breakthrough, there is a breakdown. And now, let's start the show.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's episode of Transcendental Transformation. I'm your host, Miss Raina, and today is Tuesday, April 14th, 2020. As always, we are coming live from the Sirius Star System studios here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and I hope all is well with everyone. So we got lots of exciting stuff tonight because I am doing a guest spot on Lightworker's Gift hosted by Angel Marie. And tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, I met this wonderful lady through the connection of my protege, Caleb. And, we just kind of clicked. Everything just clicked. And it's always so amazing. It's such a wonderful energy when healers and light workers and people alike can align and just click, click, click. And I am going to be so excited to be on her guest spot tomorrow at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. I believe that would make it 6 p.m. Pacific time, but don't quote me. I don't know. I think we're 3 hours behind. But yeah, so I'm going to post all sorts of stuff on my Facebook and all over my social medias. So make sure you guys look out for that. And to return the favor, I am going to have her as a guest on my show on April 28th. So I am looking forward to that, and I hope you guys are, because she has a wonderful energy. She's very high, intense energy, and I love that. I used to be a lot like that, and just good stuff. And yeah, you guys are gonna love her. So can't wait for that. Can't wait for all this good stuff happening. And yeah, it's all about the conscious shift. We really are consciously shifting as beings and stuff, and even though it's chaotic, and we're going to get all into that a little bit later, but yeah, it's feeling good stuff. But also, we are going to be doing a sessions video this week as well. As you guys know, I do little short sessions videos, and they're usually about 15, 20, 25 minute little little videos that kind of coincide maybe with the week's show, or maybe I answer questions from the audience or emails that I get, but those are going to now, instead of being on Patreon, those are going to be now on my website. And yes, unfortunately, we are going to charge a little donation fee, only because we got to keep things running. It's expensive to keep a website and all the equipment going. So hopefully you guys, if you guys like the programming and what we're going to do and what we're going to start doing, hopefully you guys will throw us a little something and help keep this show going. So as always, guys, yeah, it's another quarantine week, and another week down, and only 15 more days. And yeah, you guys gotta hold strong. It's one of those things where, this really is teaching us about who we are as people. And a lot of people will sit there and say, well, this is really tough, and it really all depends on perspective. It really depends on how you see yourself, how you see your life. If you're full of distractions, if you're full of trying to bring that balance and back into duality. And but if you're one of those people that are having a really hard time, because I know there's people out there with mental health challenges and all sorts of stuff, please feel free to reach out to me at any time on my social media. I am always there for you guys, any time of day or night. And hopefully we can get through this. Only 15 more days. Hopefully we'll cross our fingers and life will be back to where it is. So don't forget to catch us live on Twitch right now, Facebook right now, YouTube, and Periscope. We have my media assistant and protege Caleb answering the questions. So if you guys type in on Twitch or Facebook any questions, he's going to relay them to me, and we will answer them live on the show for you guys. Okay, so all right, so what did we talk about last time? Last time we were talking about meditation and a sense of awakening, and and a lot of times we're feeling, and when we're talking about awakening, I know I mostly talked a lot about meditation, but we're going to talk a few minutes about last week's show, and then we're going to get into this week's show because I have so much stuff going on. But yeah, we started talking about meditation. We started talking about awakening, and we started talking about a little bit about it, and the feeling how sometimes we feel like nobody, and how it ties into what we're going to talk into this week about a purposeful life. We talked about sometimes feeling a little bit insignificant, and based on our perspective due to our experiences in life is also a lot of times on how we view ourselves and how we're going to interpret the information that comes to us as beings. And that's really what an awakening is all about, because our lives, our constructs, our social constructs that we're taught, religion, spirituality, politics, right, wrong, all these belief systems really create blockages in our lives. And we need to have an understanding of that and the ideas that are creating those blockages for us to have an understanding of who we are. And a lot of times those blockages are put there because of that understanding. It allows us to create that understanding of who we are. And a lot of times because of we get wrapped up in our emotions, and we're going to talk about our emotions a little bit today because it all ties in to duality and having a purposeful life. But a lot of times we walk away from who we are because we get frustrated. We find it's easier just to go with the flow. It's easier just to be with the crowd and do what society expects to us, rather than go against the grain and really fulfill our purpose, really find our own personal spiritual awakening, our own personal awakening, and however you guys want to word it. But these ideas and these constructs really do cage us. And when we get into the show in a few seconds about the purposeful life, this really ties into one another, because then we understand that these ideas that were taught to us, these constructs, these social constructs that are taught to us and become these walls inside our mind, cage us, and they create chaos. And so what we do is, instead of learning the information that's needed in order for us to grow, we get tied into the chaos. We get tied into the ideas of that these constructs are our jail cells and there's no other way out, that we're actually kind of like prisoners of our own minds. We're prisoners of our own society and our own thoughts and our own emotions, but we don't have to be. And what a great thing that is, right? That we can realize we're at an evolutionary period right now, that we don't have to be that person. We don't have to hold to these ideas. We don't have to hold to these constructs. We don't have to be inside a mental and emotional cage that we believe that we are. And that's really what's going on with a lot of us from reaching a purposeful life, or finding duality, or finding our spiritual awakening, which is basically all the same. A lot of times people will say, oh, you need to find duality. And yes, duality, we're going to talk about that because that is so huge. But one cannot exist without another. You cannot have a purposeful life without duality. You cannot have a spiritual awakening without duality. You cannot have a spiritual awakening without a purposeful life, because all three of these ideas are the same. And it is for us to understand in our own truth, in our own energy, what these ideals mean for us. Because when we get down to it, and we're going to get into this later, that we're really all running, and I don't want to use this figuratively because life is not a race, but we're all really running the same ideas. We're running the same races, if you want to say, but there's no finish line, and it's really not a race per se as like we conceive a race, but we're all really doing the same thing, because we're all these spiritual individuals, and that's created by this oneness, this unity. And in order for us to find a purposeful life or have this spiritual awakening, we really have to see the lessons at hand. And that's the one thing that we have to learn. Through chaos is one of the only things. A lot of times people come to me and say, Miss Raina, there's so much chaos in my life. And I say, well, that's amazing. I'm so happy for you. And they look at me and they're like, well, why are you happy for me that there's so much chaos? And I say, well, that's the way we learn, right? That's what we do to learn. In order for us to grow, in order for us to understand, in order for us to have an emotional understanding of who we are, we have to learn through chaos. If we're happy all the time, if everything's going our way, do we ever stop and look at ourselves? Do we ever stop and reflect? Do we ever stop and try to understand everything? No. Life is great. Life is wonderful. And why do we need to Why do we need to try to understand if everything's going so well? And that's the trick, because our minds and our constructs that we're looking at really trick us. And that's one of the reasons why I really want to get this message across, that there is no right or wrong, no good or bad. Like my 5 no-nos in my teachings have always been, there are no right, wrong, good, bad, positive, negative, backwards, forwards, or better, worse. And the reason why is because all of this creates that chaos. All of those concepts create the judgment. They create the constructs. They create these ideas that sometimes are unattainable. And through judgment and through self-judgment, we throw up these walls and don't allow our spirit to grow. And spiritual growth is not a lot of times what we think it is. We always think that because of space and time, because of these ideas that we think that, that everything, because of how life is, we're born, we're, an infant, then a toddler, then a preteen, then a teenager, then a young adult, then a full-grown adult, then we go into our golden years, and then we get into old age and we die. That is not the same as spiritual growth. That is not the same as spiritual awakening. That is not the same as duality, because our minds, our concepts, and our hearts are so much more than we think it is. But because of these ideas that were taught to us, religion, politics, society's needs, our insecurities get the best of us, and because, truth be told, we are such a young race, we are such a young species, humanity is so young in its evolution that we try to think we understand what life is about, when, to be honest with us, we really have the slightest clue. And that's okay, because how do we get that information? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today, because that's what we're here for. I mean, we're looking for a purposeful life, right? Most of us have hit rock bottom. Most of us have gone through the ringer. We have gone through our own personal hell. We have faced our personal demons. Some of us are still facing our demons. Some of us are caught up in our demons. And it's the soul's journey. It is the soul's journey to create the need to find oneself, because really that's what life is about, right? We're here to experience. We're here to experience perspective. We're here to gain perspective of who we are as not only an individual, but as a one, as a unity, to understand what the different perspectives are through life. And that's really what we're looking for. When we're looking for a purposeful life, when we're looking for unity, when we're looking for duality or a spiritual awakening, what our soul is really saying to us is that we've gone off path. That the draw for us to find ourselves is greater, because that's truly what we're here for. We're here to grow. We're here to experience. We're here to gain every perspective of every experience possible. But we get caught up in a materialistic world because we're young. I always say to people that we look at life and we say, well, we don't get mad at children, right? We don't get mad as parents. We don't get mad at children for, especially like toddlers and 5, 6 years old, or 7, 8, because they're growing. I mean, how many 5, 6-year-old, they learn something, they think they know more than their parents. I know all you parents out there can agree with me. Hey, even teenagers, right? They get that rebellious, I know more than you attitude. And because they think they understand the world with the limited amount of consciousness, with the limited amount of information that they know. But because they don't have experience, they don't really know. And that's exactly where humanity's at. That's exactly where we're at. And that's why these concepts of trying to find ourselves are so important to us, because we're caught in this emotional chaos. We're trying to find that. And so what we really want to do is start the seed. We want to start planting the seed of looking at light versus darkness. We have to look at the darkness. We have to look at the light, because, in finding a purposeful life and finding spiritual awakening and finding yourself, it is all about duality. Duality teaches us perspective of our own self. How can we find ourselves? How can we grow if we can't look at ourselves? We can't. And so we must understand, which we'll get into a little bit later, light versus dark, and why there's no such thing as good versus bad, or evil versus good. There really isn't. These constructs are created by humanity because we don't understand really what it is we're feeling. But a lot of us gets caught up so much in our chaos for so many lives that we don't release it. And a lot of times we think that karma is playing a evil plan towards us. That one of the things I heard all the time growing up, that if you don't learn your lessons now, you're going to come back and repeat it. And I always knew that that wasn't correct. I would always sit there, I would talk to my guides, Laura and Makrana, and as I grew as a spirit guide, as I came into my own and realized who I was, I realized that no, these are just social constructs developed by humanity because we don't have an understanding of what it is. So karma is not this thing out to get us in our lives. It's not this thing that's stopping us from finding our destiny, from finding a purposeful life, from finding these things. What karma does is it brings lessons in. So if I'm living a life, let's say in Egypt, and I'm at a certain point of consciousness, and because I'm at a certain point of consciousness, I can only understand one thing at that time. Well, maybe 5,000 lifetimes later, I can finally understand on a deeper level what the end result of that lesson is. Well, karma brings it to us, not in a I'm out to get you vengeful way. It brings this to us in a way of saying, hey, you're old enough to understand this now. So let's look at it, because now we are a different person. It's a different age. We can gain a whole new perspective. You're more emotionally, mentally, and spiritually you've aged, you've grown in that, you've matured in those areas, and so now we can look and understand things. So what do I mean by that? Well, do you believe the same things that you believed when you were 7 years old? No. You may have looked at the world one way, and you may have thought that the world was one way at one point, and then realized that as we got older, we realized that, oh, my thoughts grew. As I matured, my emotional understanding of that idea grew, and so now I think differently. And it is the same thing with fulfilling our purpose. It's the same thing with duality. It's the same thing with karma. It's the same thing with all these ideas, because the main part of the soul is to be in neutrality. Neutrality brings us to that point. Neutrality brings us, because we don't want to be in we talk about places of harmony. We talk about homeostasis and balance. And really, to be honest with you, neutrality is really what it's all about. It's a balance of understanding the light versus dark, positive and negative. And I don't mean positive and negative as far as like actually good versus bad. I mean it more almost like as electrical charge. Positive and negative charges attract each other, and you need one for another, or you need one in another to create that balance. And that's really what we're looking for when we're talking about balance and homeostasis and harmony. So, all right, guys, we're going to take a break for a second. I need a little bit of water. My throat's a little bit dry, and we'll be right back after these messages from the Life of Reyna.
A message from the Life of Reyna. We live in a world faced with many tough challenges. Our lives become chaotic and filled with disaster ever so quickly, most of the time before we even realize. Our issues beat down our mental mindset, and an imbalance of emotions become prevalent. The Life of Reyna is dedicated to helping people on the deepest spiritual level. Miss Raina, the creator of transcendental development and growth, works on your core issues and finds the solutions which allow you to break free from the emotional bondages of life, helping you achieve the life you've always wanted to live. Isn't it time that you lived life for you? Call the Life of Reyna, 561-846-2190, and schedule your appointment today. That's 561-846-2190. Or email thelifeofreyna@icloud.com.
All right, everybody, we are back. If you're just joining us, I am your host, Miss Raina, and you're listening to Transcendental Transformation. We are talking about the ideas of duality and purposeful life and how these constructs and are creating our idea that we're not fulfilling our lives. And so, right before that, we were talking about the balance of good and a balance of positive and negative, and looking at both sides of life, because a lot of times, what we end up doing is a lot of times in the spiritual community, and I really hope that those of us who are spiritual that are listening to this show tonight understand that we have to get out of the idea of looking at only positive things, because the negative is going to hurt us. We talk about purpose all the time, and the first thing when we have to look at is when we look at duality is both sides of everything. So when I talk about this is for duality to happen, if we look at one side to the other, then it doesn't exist. So in duality, we have both parts. We have the light, which is male. We have the female, which is dark. It's almost like if you look at the Chinese symbol of yin yang, you have the light, which is the male, and the female, which is dark. And that idea, that concept that the Chinese have come up with is a very, very 100% accurate of how the universe works, because male and female is not good and bad. And it's really masculine and feminine. It's not male and female like as in gender. It's really masculine and feminine. And a lot of times in our societies, especially the world, because we've become a patriarchal society, we think that men are strong and better and women are weak and less than us. And so there's creates this huge imbalance of duality, because as men we reject the feminine energy, because especially in American society, I hear men all the time call each other girls and put each other down as far as girls, calling them gay and calling them harsher words than that. And that's what really happens, because we view, a lot of society views that the female is a weaker energy than the male energy, but that cannot be further than the truth. In order for one to happen, the other one has to push. So if we take the yin yang sign of the Chinese symbol, in order for yang to happen, yin has to push. And that's the same thing in duality. This is not a Buddhist idea. This is not a Chinese idea. This is not an Eastern idea. This is how the universe works. And so the idea of duality has to happen, because it's almost like a charge. Because when unity starts, because that's how we start with unity, in order for us to gain a perspective through duality, we have to split. We have to come apart. And in order for us to come apart to look at ourselves, we have to have a polar opposite. So if we want to call the masculine energy positive and we want to call the feminine energy negative, well, then that's how we push, and that's how we feed each other into growth. That's how we gain perspective. Because if anybody knows chemistry or anything like that, or science or anything like that, what happens when you put magnets together, when you put the two polarities that are similar together, when you put the other opposite ones, they attract. So how these how the basic fundamentals work. And that's the same thing in spirituality. That's the same thing in life. So I want to get away from these concepts, that these ideas, in order for us to gain a purposeful life, that we have to be strong and go-getter. Because one of the things that I find that I have to help with a lot of people is that I get a lot of spiritual people always saying, well, my business coach goes out and tells me I got to go and do this. And what they're doing is they're creating an imbalance, because they're taking all the masculine energy, because the masculine energy is the go-getter, it's the doer, it's going to be the go outside and aggressive, do it. But if it's unchecked by the feminine energy, it becomes unbalanced. And so what happens is we don't achieve our goals because we're in balance. We're such a rush to go out there and get what we think we're trying to get, because hey, we're on a time limit. We only have, let's say if we live 100 years, we only have 100 years to live. Most of us aren't going to live 100 years. Most of us are going to live between 50 and 80 years old. And so we think we're in this big rush to do everything because of we're on a time limit, that our bodies are basically a ticking time bomb, that we're limited by our physical life, that we need to go out and do all these things. And so there's a balance of there's an imbalance that is created. And so what we have to do is we have to start looking at things. One of the things that I hear in the community all the time, and I was about to mention this earlier and I decided not to because I wanted to speak about something first, was I always hear we got to be positive. We can't be negative. Always be positive. In order to live a healthy life, in order to live a full, happy life, you got to be balanced, or you got to be positive. You got to be balanced. You got to be stable. If you get the good job, if you have the wife and kids or the husband and kids, and you get the white picket fence and you can pay your bills, well, everything is stable. Everything is wonderful. Everything is homeostatic. And that is furthest from the truth. That is actually a lie to our soul, because because of our understanding of what we think is good versus bad, right versus wrong, we think that if we have all these things that we're successful, and therefore we're in the right side, we're in the good side, we're in the light. And really, that could be further from the truth. So we have to be able to understand that life has to have that balance. Life has to have negative does not mean bad. Positive does not mean good. You know, somebody that I was watching recently, you know, put it in terms that you know, that our biology, and I really like this idea because biology does do this. That our biology and biology of creatures is to go to the light to survive. In order for biology and life to survive, we have to go to the light. And so it is in our DNA to think that in order for us to live, in order for us to be healthy and purposeful and do all these things, we have to go to the light. And we ignore the dark because we think the dark is bad. We think the shadows of who we are. We think the all these experiences of chaos that come with us is bad, and we want to run away from it. And we can't live a purposeful life because we're running away from all these ideas. And so what we have to end up doing is we have to create this duality. If we want a purposeful life, if we want to find our purpose, if we want to find who we are in truth and see things from a perspective that we're really meant to see things, then what we really have to do is find that duality. And that means we have to let go of our ideas that light is good and dark is bad, because neither are neither. And so one of the things that I have to do is, especially when I teach people, is sit there and I have to say, well, you know, there are no good, bad, right, wrong. And a lot of times our ego fights it because we're told that this is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong. And in order for us to be the good people that we are, we have to be all good. And in order for us to get to heaven and the other side, we have to be all good and do all good. And if we don't do this, then we're going to an evil place, or some spiritualists believe we're going to limbo. And it's always this gruesome punishment. And life, people, is not like that. Life is not about that at all. It really isn't. What ends up happening in our lives are just an act that we're playing. We're playing these roles. We're playing these characters in life, and everything that we do is to gain perspective for our own personal growth. Even the rejection of dark still allows us to grow. But it is in that moment of understanding that our darkness of who we are is just as important as the light of who we are. And we must maintain that neutrality, that neutral point of view, so that we can see both sides of life, so that we can use them to gain who we are. How many of you have gone out there, have had business coaches, and have had told people, you know, gone to self-help groups and all this stuff, therapists, and they always tell you, you got to think about the positive in life. In order to get off drugs, you got to accept a certain religion. You have to do all these things, and you have to live this life. And it puts so much pressure on you, and it really sets you up to fail. And why does it set you up to fail? Because it is a lie. We cannot grow without the other. If you turn your back on one side, what is going to end up happening is we're only facing the positive. What ends up happening is that we only see that and we cannot grow, mature. We can't mature, we can't grow, we can't feel the chaos, we can't grow here. Because this, the mind and the heart, are the true essence of the soul. That is really what grabs us. That is really what gets us to grow. And the chaos that brings through, we call it darkness, we call it evil, we call it all these things because we don't understand it. We're so young in our evolution. We are so young that we cannot purposefully understand what it is we feel. That is why we think light is good, because hey, when we're out in the light, when we're out during the day, everything is good, nothing can hurt us. But that's not true. A lot of people have things that happen. A lot of people die, a lot of people get injured. I grew up in a very bad area. A lot of people got shot. Chicago was very much like that. I mean, day or night, it doesn't matter. Sure, maybe things go up at night, but that's human perspective. And so we train our brains to think that light is good, daytime is good, so night and darkness must be bad, it must be evil. And that's not duality. And this is why we can't find who we are. Because when we're sitting there and we're trying to look out who we are, and we're trying to find ourselves as who we are, every time we go to one side or the other, if we're in the darkness too much and in our victim and chaos and anger and rage, then the positive side tries to pull us back into neutrality. If we're too much in the light and the positive side, then the dark side kind of kicks us in the butt to pull us out. And what do we think when life is good and everything's going well, right? What do we think when things happen? Oh, something happened. Life has fallen apart. We think of it as bad. But it's not bad. It's our own soul trying to pull us back into neutrality, because that's where we find the purpose of who we are. That is why we find the purpose of life. That is why we find the purpose of our perspective, so that we can grow as a race, as we can grow as an individual. If we end up trying to create this imbalance, that's all we're going to feel. And that's where most of us reside. Most of us reside in balance. For you people who are in science and chemistry and all that stuff, the law of conservation of electric charge states that you can never create a net electric charge. Instead, charge can only move from one place to another. And even in the laws of physics, it states that. Why? Because that is how the laws of the universe work. That is how we as people work. We think that we're separate from the earth. We think that we're separate from the universe. We think that we're put on this earth from a creation of a God to rule the universe. And we couldn't be further. The reason why we are in balance is because of that idea. Because we think we're meant to go out. Yes, we are meant to explore and create and do all these wonderful things. But we think that because we have little understanding, and because we think that all these things outside are going to gain us the things that we're looking at, it doesn't happen. And that's why so many of us choose to create chaos. That's why so many of us go after money. So many of us go after trying to be famous, trying to be somebody, because we're trying too hard to be in one side or the other. It's a hard concept to get, right? Or maybe for some of you it doesn't. Maybe some of you it's clicking like that. And that's wonderful. But this concept goes deep for so many levels. And every lifetime you can understand that at such a different perspective. Because honestly, that's what it's supposed to do. Every single lifetime, you're supposed to find the purpose of who you are. And that's not meaning you're supposed to go out and become a millionaire. That's not meaning you're supposed to go out and become the most famous person. Hey, that's great if you do. Many blessings and much to you. I really think that's amazing. But when you make that your life because of the insecurities, because you think that these ideas of having fancy cars, being an awesome athlete, being good looking, is more important than finding purpose in life, finding your purpose, finding the purpose of perspective through duality, that's when the chaos will constantly go through your life. And it's a horrible way to live in an instance, but it's so vital to our growth. And that's why I never look at chaos as a bad or negative thing. That's why negative and bad don't exist. Neither does positive. Neither does good. It doesn't exist. Because I would not be where I'm at in my spiritual evolution if I did not go through so much chaos. Right now, I am going through a lot of chaos. I'm going through a health issue because in my spiritual growth, I am not an enlightened being. I am not. I've lived many, many, many lives, but I am not enlightened because if I was, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't need to be here. And so through my experiences, I understand that when I come here, even if it's to help the world or do what I need to do, it is also for me too, because I have to gain more perspective, because that's what I want. That's why I thirst for knowledge. That's why I really sit here and study and I'm always talking to people and trying to figure life out and trying to figure things out. And even throughout my own life, I'm trying to figure out more duality. How can I see what I'm going through a different perspective? Because purposeful, how are we looking as purpose? If we're looking purpose as successful, well then I guess I would be a failure, because right now, no, I am not successful as far as a business. I've had ups and downs and stuff, and right now, because of the virus and everything's at a standstill because no one's spending money. So does that mean I am not successful? Does that mean I'm not purposeful? Absolutely not. My perspective is as I'm purposeful because I am who I am, and I do what I do because of who I am and because I want that perspective. I don't ever claim to know it all, but I do claim to know what I know and hear. I do claim to know what the laws of the universe hold because the laws tell you. If you sit back and you allow the universe, that's one of the things that I'm trying to teach Caleb right now, my protege, is to sit back and slow down. Allow yourself, especially in the heart, to open up to find your purpose, to open up to find the duality in you. Because in order to find the purpose, in order to find the duality, you need to gain a perspective of who you are. And the perspective isn't out here. Our perspective isn't gaining by all these different ideas. It's not gaining by what we think is purposeful, what we think is going to get us the money, going to get us the likes, going to get us the notoriety in life. It's not going to happen that way. That's just the truth in life. We as a human race, we delude ourselves so much because we think that the external world is the truthful world. And the external world is only part of our perspective. The internal world is another part of our perspective. And then the mind and the heart is another one as well. All right, guys, we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back after these messages from the Life of Reyna.
A message from the Life of Reyna. We live in a world faced with many tough challenges. Our lives become chaotic and filled with disaster ever so quickly, most of the time before we even realize. Our issues beat down our mental mindset, and an imbalance of emotions become prevalent. The Life of Reyna is dedicated to helping people on the deepest spiritual level. Miss Raina, the creator of Transcendental Development and Growth, works on your core issues and finds the solutions which allow you to break free from the emotional bondages of life, helping you achieve the life you've always wanted to live. Isn't it time that you lived life for you? Call the Life of Reyna, 561-846-2190, and schedule your appointment today. That's 561-846-2190. Or email thelifeofreyna@icloud.com.
Okay, we are back for the final part of our show. We got about 20 minutes left, or maybe about 15. I always stop at about 5 minutes too. So yes, we're talking about the darkness and the light and perspective. And just to reiterate what we're kind of going over is the darkness most people again think is bad and evil. We associate it with night and pain and suffering. We associate it with slow, but it is slow. It is the feminine energy. It is the nurturing. It's the womb. It's the part where we learn to understand our pain, learn to understand who we are as a soul through through pain and suffering, through perspective, in order for us to go out. It is the feminine energy, not the female, not a female. It's not a female. It is feminine energy. And men, I implore you, if for the men that are listening out there, it is okay to be feminine. It is okay to embrace the femininity. We, as a society here in our lives, we shun the feminine, especially as males, because we think that it's weak. But really, no, it's not. It's actually a very, very strong force. And the masculine energy cannot survive and cannot do its job without the feminine. But the feminine energy does kick our butt, and that's the reason why we shun. Another reason why we shun it, because we think that anything that pushes us to grow, anything that causes pain, it must be bad. It must be evil. I don't want to feel that. But if we learn to embrace it, if we learn to understand it, and we learn to grow, we can experience these ideas of a purposeful life. The light is masculine, as I said earlier. It's the go-getter. It's the more aggressive feminine energy. But in order for it to do its job, it must have understanding of the feminine energy. It must have the knowledge that the feminine energy gives to the masculine. Otherwise, it is chaotic. That's why even for females who try to be too masculine and try to go out there, or anybody, male or female, and try to go out there and be these go-getters, they may achieve financial success and popularity, but it's all chaotic. It's all about egotism. It's all about lies. And eventually what ends up happening is everything crumbles because they're building a house on false ideas. And when you build a house, which is your soul, on false, and your life on false ideas, it crumbles. And any architect will tell you, if you build with bad materials, it'll crumble. And that's the same thing with life. So don't be jealous, people, of people that are successful. It may be their path to be successful for whatever, but that's teaching them something. And a lot of times people who are successful aren't very happy. That doesn't mean that you can't have money and be successful and be spiritual and be all these things rolled up into one. But it is a fine balance of understanding. And until you truly understand the idea of feminine and masculine energy, positive and negative energy, then what we're going to do is we're going to find ourselves in chaos constantly. So what we have to do is, in order for us to gain the duality, again, in order for us to gain these things, because if I look on these websites, I was pulling up a lot of websites lately, and if I look at them even now, I look at them and I say, well, how am I going to, and I put out 9 things to start a perspective life or purposeful life, and I see all these things geared towards business. You know, create a compelling future, know your whys, find your mission. You got to find your mission. How are you going to find these things if you don't even know who you are? Don't you think that it is more important to find out who you are, what your energy vibes with, what your energy resonates with, before you go out and just do whatever it is you think you need to do? One of the things that reminds me of is a long time ago when I was growing up, we had a family business, and I was being groomed to be the child that took over, the daughter that took over the company, because I was supposed to be the prodigal daughter that, you know, that was going to take it over and build it from a multi-million-dollar business to a multi-billion-dollar business. And my whole life I was told that this was my purpose. I was told that in order for me to, you know, please my parents and do all these things, I had to do this, which means I had to get good grades and I had to study and I had to do all this stuff. And it put so much pressure on me. And I knew that every time I tried to fill my dad's shoes, it didn't feel right. And it caused not only emotional chaos, but mental and physical and just life chaos. And, you know, I worked for my family for many years, and I don't regret it. I loved it. I did have a good time, but I knew it wasn't me. And it was hard because I wanted so badly to make my parents happy, because as a child I was being conditioned too, that you have to respect your parents, that you have to you have to listen to your parents, you have to do all these things. And then I realized in high school, I realized, being who I was and maturing as a spirit guide, maturing with working with even my own guides, and realizing that, this isn't feeling right. This is not creating my purpose. This is not creating my duality. And and then it all kind of hit me at once. And when I told my dad that I didn't want to take over the business and I didn't want to do what he wanted me to do, it was hard on him. He took it like as if I was almost betraying the family. Not so bad, but he took it pretty bad. And my mom was like, "Well, Junior, she doesn't want to take over the business. You can't force her. That's just not something she wants to do." And it was a hard time for my family because my dad's ideas of what he built, that thought he built him happiness, because again he thought that money, success, family, all these things meant stability, meant bringing into balance, bringing the duality. He thought that on a subconscious level that all these things meant, that was being a purposeful life. And it was great that that was his purpose, but that's not my purpose. And a lot of times we do that. We're rushed into college. We're rushed. You got to know what you're doing by college. You got to know where you're going by college. And a lot of us don't know what we're doing. I changed careers so many times. I always knew that what I wanted to do as far as this, but I changed careers so many times because I was trying to force myself to fit into a world that I knew I didn't want to be into. And so a lot of times we're looking for those ideas. We're looking for these decisions. We're looking for these ideas to create a purposeful life because we think there's reasoning behind it. We think there's truth. If I find my mission, as this website is saying, and I act today, if I go out there and get it, well, then I'm not wasting time, because if I sit around and do nothing, then I'm just not being useful as society. I'm wasting my life. And that's what we think. But some of the wisest, most richest filled people in the world sit and do nothing but meditate. They sit and do nothing but reflect and gain perspective. And they are the richest, most purposeful beings on this planet. We talk about avatars. It doesn't matter what religion or spirituality you think of. We talk about every one of spirituality or religion has an avatar. Whether it's Jesus, Buddha, Allah, whatever, they all have it. They all have an avatar. And these ideas of this goal of transcendence, these ideas that they attain this enlightenment. And that's really what we're searching for. So yes, we can go out there and take all these steps and go get them, and don't say no, never say no. Go out there and be focused, be on time, and do all these things that all these websites tell us to do, because I'm looking at them right now. You got to create a purpose in life. You got to call to action. You gotta do all these things in order for you to be successful, because you as a being aren't successful unless you have money, a family, a house, a career. You're not successful unless you make a name for yourself. And to be honest with you, I have already been a success. And it does not matter whether or not I have money. It does not matter whether or not I'm famous. I am successful because I take the time to gain these perspectives about all these things that are going on. Because the decisions that I make for my purpose are to be that being that grows, to take a step away from the rest of the world. And we're going to actually talk about that tomorrow a little bit on the show for Angel. We're going to talk a little bit about that, because we're going to talk a little bit about how in life that like what's going on in the world and how we can step away from it. And that has to do with this. The reason why you are in chaos, the reason why you're in the predicament that you're in, is because you're choosing one side of duality over the other. You're either choosing to be in anger and pain and suffering, and you're not trying to balance it out through neutrality, or you're trying to be too positive all the time and happy, and you're not growing through pain and suffering. You have to become neutral. You have to find that neutrality. You have to gain both perspectives of every angle of every life at all time in order for you to find your purpose. I mean, you can go on any website, you can hire a coach, and they can tell you how to be a go-getter. They can tell you all these things. They can tell you all these speculations about life, what to do, what to say, how to do things, and they can turn you into, the next TED speaker. But again, that does not mean that you're purposeful. Actually, a lot of times that takes you away from your purpose, and then it sets you up for a bigger crash later. And it always happens. It happens to everybody. So if we, a long time ago, I had a couple stories, and I want to run these by because I only got like 5 minutes. And there's so much more I had listed that I really wanted to talk about with everybody, but it's just a lot of information, and I think it'll be best if maybe we talk more about this in these ideas. But when we talk about finding a purposeful life, we also have to talk about morals and judgment, or morals and any values, morals and beliefs and values, because a lot of times those ideas stop us. Those ideas create that imbalance when we get out of neutrality. We get out of that reflection of duality. And so what ends up happening is I've had several people, and I'm just using a couple of these people as an example because I feel that their stories are a little bit spot on in what's going on. And so, one of the parents that I was going through is, they're like I told you, I'm at the wrong stuff. I'm looking at my own story there. I can't even find all the stuff now. Anyways. Good notes, especially when they're there. But one of the times, I know that one of the stories that I was going to mention that I have in the notes that I can't find, ended up being that this lady Nancy was all chaotic all the time. She always had to, try to chase her ideas of being this idea of being this image and this that she created to be Nancy, this superstar, and that everybody needs to go to her because she's the one that's going to get you to live this purposeful life, that's going to get you money and get you all these things. And she became sick. She became very ill. She became disastrous. Everything crumbled. Her whole empire crumbled because of her ideas and her inability to see duality. She only wanted to focus on one side of duality, and it became so chaotic that she got sucked into the other one without trying to even fight it, and it just became a snowball. Another one, and that one of my other clients was always positive. She was a very big spiritualist. She always wanted to be positive about everything. Everybody had to be Tracy had to be positive about everything. She only wanted to see the light. She never wanted to talk about the dark. She never wanted to talk about chaos, anything. It was always positive, because if we're gonna be on this mission to light, then the positivity had to be there. And what ended up happening is that she could not learn lessons. Like, years went by and she could not understand, and I kept telling her she needs to view. There is no good or bad, right or wrong. There is no positive and negative. Don't mean good versus bad. It's an attraction to each other. You need to be neutral. You need to use both sides to gain perspectives through your life. And when chaos happens, when that negative side happens, you got to understand it through that side, and then allow neutrality to bring the positive back so that you can understand it through a different perspective, so that you can get a whole idea of it. And because of that, it stopped her from actually seeing the truth. It became so disastrous in her life that everything fell apart. Her marriage, her business, everything, because she was so rattled. Because, what do you mean? I expressed myself. I was always positive. I was always these things, and it didn't turn out the way I wanted. What else did it? And I've had a few other people think that they were being punished by a god and the universe for something, because why would this happen? So I only know I got a few minutes left, but I want to tell you about that. There is no God, or there is no universe punishing you. You are God. You are in control of who you are at all times. It is up to you and your choices to determine whether or not you want to focus on one side or the other, or become neutral and gain a bigger perspective. Expand yourself through gaining perspective of both positive and negative, light and dark. Gain a perspective of who you are as a soul. Don't rush out there to become the next big thing. Let it happen within inside you. Open your heart. Open your consciousness to expanding. Walk away from the outside world and let the outside world come to you, because you're going to see a whole different ball game when that kind of thing happens. It's a totally different experience. But stop punishing yourselves, because there's no reason to punish yourself. There's no reason to constantly have to pray to somebody or beg somebody, angels, spirit guides, whatever you believe in. There's no reason for it. You are the God. You are God, and you need to understand that you can control your life. But all you have to do is separate from being on one side. Come to the neutrality. Come to duality, and find the purposeful life. Okay. All right, everybody, that is my show for tonight. Hopefully you guys have learned something tonight. If not, well, there's going to be many more shows that I guess we can learn something. So don't forget to find us on our Facebook at facebook.com/Transcendental Transformation. Visit our YouTube at youtube.com/Transcendental Transformation. Visit my website, soulandspiritguide.com, to make sure you sign up for the newsletter to receive special VIP access to hidden shows and special guest offers. Or if you have any questions about the shows that we do, or just want to know something, email me at Transcendental Transformations, that's plural with an S, at gmail.com. Yeah, guys, so just remember that we're changing things, and tomorrow night at 9 o'clock Eastern time, make sure you hit our Facebook page, because we're going to be doing that amazing thing with angels. So I'm looking forward to it. Always remember to believe in yourself, and it's not our abilities or our talents that make us who we are, but it is our choices. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.